Good afternoon and welcome at a talk about Fusion development. It's fun to be here. We're slightly behind schedule, so let's see if I can make it a little bit, little bit quicker, but I'll try. We're going to talk about low code and full code and how they can play together, a Fusion development love story. And you might have heard about low code, and if you heard about it, you know that the premise of low code is that it's all around developing faster than ever before. So if you've seen presentations, if you heard about low code, every presentation talks about how low code can help you achieve your results quicker. And I want to walk you through really quick first, okay, what is low code then all about? Then we're going to have a look at some benefits, and then we're going to talk about what Fusion development and what does it mean. Now, if you talk about low code is a way of building your applications or building your solutions by using using existing building blocks. So when you talk about low code, a lot of the samples that you see out there, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Betty Blocks or OutSystems or one of the other vendors, it's always around solving business problems and solving those business problems by using building blocks, Lego blocks that you can use to connect different systems together, build apps or build processes, and work with existing systems. Now it's all around rapid application development. So the whole gist about all those low-code platforms that are out there are all around achieving your results quickly. And if you're using building blocks or existing components, it's probably quicker than reinventing the wheel every time over and over again. Now, if you're doing Java or TypeScript, whether you're doing C#, you can also get in modules, you can get in packages, so those could help you as well. But the whole gist around low code is that you are in a existing ecosystem where you connect everything together, meaning that you use those building blocks to achieve your results. Now, that typically means that you're having a more high-level or declarative approach to building your solution. You typically don't end up doing too much code. Now, it's called low code and not necessarily no code. So what you'll see is that in most low-code platforms, there is configuration options. There is options where you actually write either formulas or you describe what you're trying to achieve. And that typically means that you end up with some form of code as well. And where low code really shines is whenever you already have an existing data model. So if you have a model that you can reuse to build your applications, whether it's a model-driven or metadata-based approach, it will help you achieve results quicker. Now, when you say what are the benefits, what are we trying to achieve with low code, then we typically see that low code solutions focus on business productivity, focus on a business challenge a user might have. But you will see in a second that it's not only business problems that you can tackle by using low code. And because we're in a controlled environment, a lot of things are taken care of for us, like security, governance, that are typically things that are already tackled within the low code platform for you. You don't have to worry about that. And at the same time, you still have to achieve, let's say, a secure environment, so you still might need to do some configuration. Now, when you're using low code, you typically see that you'll need less, let's say, professional development skills. Now, I'm not saying you don't need any development skills as well. You still have to reason logically when you're designing in a low-code platform, but you don't need the 4 years of experience that you might need if you're doing Java or TypeScript or C#. Now, you typically see that most low-code platforms also allow you to integrate with legacy systems and data sources. And by default, there is a great UI, or at least that's what most low-code platforms promise us. Not gonna argue with that. But in the end, if you want to achieve great UI, you also might need some UX experience to make sure that it actually looks pretty. Now, the whole premise is less code, and they promise us less code means fewer bugs. And the thing is, if you look at the world around us, the Gartner or the Foresters of these worlds always talk about, okay, everyone is going to do low code. And one of the samples is like in 2025, 70% of new applications developed by enterprises will have low code components or will interact with low code. I like this quote. And at the same time, when you talk about low code, just because it's low code doesn't mean it's low complexity. There still can be really complex scenarios that you might need to tackle by using low code. Now at the same time, if you're thinking about low-code, most people when they think about low-code talk about, okay, we have to build applications. And if you really think about it, oh, I want to go back for the picture for you. There you go. I make sure that the slides are being shared. Now, if you talk about low-code, just because we're talking about low-code doesn't mean you actually have to have a low-code platform in place. A lot of companies already use low-code. I mean, low-code could be a solution that's built in Excel, could be a solution built in Access. I'm from the Microsoft world, so like long ago we had Access, and you see a lot of Access databases around there. There's VBA macros, and in the end, that is all low-code. It's typically something that's built by a non-professional developer, either someone handy with a computer built something, configured something. It typically means it's missing proper ownership. There's usually no documentation at all, and there's no life cycle. Somebody built that Excel file, and there might be a gazillion copies of that Excel file floating around in your organization, and support is not standardized. So there are some disadvantages around low-code. And what we typically see is that the low-code platforms that are out there that are trying to tackle these issues by making sure that governance is in place, making sure that you have control, making sure that there is documentation. And what we typically see is that in a business, if you're a IT-savvy person, whether it's a developer or an administrator, if something happens with low-code, it becomes your problem, and you have to fix that problem. And that's where low-code platforms can really help out. Now, if you look at the Microsoft world, when we want to talk about Fusion development, if you look at the Microsoft ecosystem, you might have seen images like this. You've been doing Visual Studio or VS Code. You might have been writing C#, TypeScript, Java, whatever, Python for that matter. And if you look at the ecosystem, what you see is that Microsoft has a lot of integration touch points where, as a full code developer, you can integrate with low code into the development experience. Here you see that the Microsoft low code platform is the Microsoft Power Platform, and you can integrate by building Power Apps, application development, Power Automate, where you can do workflow, logic, business logics, maybe Power Virtual Agents or Power Pages if you want to do external websites. Or you can even integrate your own code into a low-code experience. And I got a few demos on that, and so we're gonna focus on those, just making sure that we touch everything. I want to showcase a Power App, quickly challenge you when we talk about Power Apps, what you can achieve with that. We're going to have a quick look at Power Automate, and then finally we have a quick look at the Visual Studio, like the real dev world as well. Now, first of all, whenever we talk about low code, we typically see a concept around integration. And it doesn't matter what you're building, whether it's any low-code system for that matter, but there's going to be integration with different systems. And the way that you integrate in the Microsoft Power Platform is by using data connectors. Data connectors are an abstraction layer above on an API that describes what that API does and allows an end user to integrate with that API without actually understanding how that API might work. You get a visual representation of your API. And out of the box, there are 900 different cloud services already available. But if you're a developer and you have an API, you can build your own custom connector. It's basically a description on top of your open API specification. And if you would do that, what you will get is an overview, and as you can see here, we've got a typical Power Automate process where you see different building blocks. What we see, something called manually trigger a flow. When does this need to happen? Apparently when I click a button. And then what you see something like get items, or get invent on hand, or get additional details, or send an email for the details that I get. So what you can do with a data connector is you can expose that API to people who never have developed before and might not necessarily understand how an API works. The cool thing about this is that if you have an API, you'll probably have stuff like paging. You don't get all items at the same time. You get the first 10 and you have to iterate over them. If you provide a user with a data connector, what happens is that you can handle stuff like that, making sure that it gets all the items, regardless whether it's 10 items or 1 million, it will just iterate over it as long as there are new items. So it is an interesting approach. Bringing your API to a low-code developer allows you to interact with different users. And there is a session tomorrow by Daniel Laskovic on how to build this, so definitely check that out. But once you have that API connector, what you can then do is you can integrate in your application. And what you can do in an application is you could say, I'm going to build an app, I'm going to build a few screens and interact with that API and interact with that connector. So I've got a sample here where a customer wanted to have an experience to edit some content, and they wanted to make sure that some people in the organization could edit some content in a SaaS platform. And it was, for that matter, something that we could have built with full code. Obviously, it's not that hard to build a full code solution where we do authentication, where we're going to edit those 5 or 6 fields, edit a website, edit a phone number, edit a display name. The cool thing with Power Apps is that because I have that connector, I can interact with that API and I can build this screen using reusable building blocks, using that form really, really quickly. So in order to prove to a customer that we can have a content editing experience for a few people, we can build this app in a few days rather than implementing this and the backend using a lot of time and effort to build those screens, build those previews, just by using reusable building blocks that are already present within my Power App. And then finally, where it really gets interesting is, let's say I have a full code experience. What I can do is I can bring all that business logic from my full code experience to the hands of low-code developers. So what I can do is what we saw with those connectors is I could get data, I could get additional details. And if you have low-code developers who are using that approach, they're using PowerFX. PowerFX is the way that any Power Platform you interact with it. And what you can do is with PowerFX, I can integrate it into my own Blazor application. So what I can do is, and I have a quick demo about that. Let me switch over. What I can do, there we go to my Visual Studio. What I have here is I've put in a NuGet package. I pulled in the PowerFX NuGet package, and if I do that, what I need to do is I'll need to make sure that I have the interpreter and the Marshall members available. But once I have those available, what I can do is I can configure something around PowerFX. I can say, okay, pull in PowerFX v1. With that, I can even get strongly typed information from my Swagger API. And with that in place, what I now can do is in my Blazor frontend, I can use that PowerFX experience to interact with the data already on my screen. So to give you a brief overview, what I have here is a PowerFX implemented in my Blazor screen. I've got a table with some data, and I did the add column. And what I can do with the add column is I can add some content, and maybe I'm going to create a new column called discount. And what I want the discount column to be is I want it to have the price and then only 80% of the price. So I'm going to give it 20% discount on this column. And if I do this, what happens is that it automatically starts calculating this value for me. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to build this. I can give this to my end users, and as long as those end users are able to understand this Excel type formula, this PowerFX formula, they can interact with it. Now the cool thing is that if I go one step further, let me remove those, add an additional column. What I can also do is I can say maybe I want to query my on-hand inventory, and because I know how PowerFX works, what I can do is I can talk to my existing connector. So I have here my invent API connector, get invent on hand. What it will do is, as it describes, it will get the current items on hand based on the item ID, and it will return me the number of items in stock. Now, because I already created that connector, I can put this in. I can say add column, and what happens is this will reach out. It's always a bit tricky. Oh, I got an error, and there it is. So inventory 12, 14, and 10. What this does is this reaches out to the API that we just saw here. So there we go. It's the invent API part. It will reach out to that API. It will pull in the item ID or put in the item ID, and it will check how many items there are on hand. Now, Obviously, this is not no code, this is low code. You have to understand how Power of X works, but people already interacting with things like the Power Platform might be aware the way that those methods work. So it's a really interesting way to bring low code to your existing application. It's a NuGet package. It's like 10, 12 lines of code to get in that calculator or get in that Power of X engine. And with that, any user that uses your application can interact with it through a low code method. With that, I actually made it, I guess, right on time. There we go. If you want to reach out, want to know more, my details are on the screen. And there we go. So details, Twitter, GitHub, everything is out there. All the samples are out there. And the slides will be shared. What I did is I'll make sure that all the links for all the samples and input are on there. So once the slides are shared, you can go through all the content. With that, if there's questions, I'm going to be at the table there and feel free to catch up. Thanks.